Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lieutenant Colonel James Kerr. Today we remember and commemorate the 78th anniversary of Victory in the Pacific Day. On the afternoon of the 15th of August 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his nation's acceptance of the Allies' terms of surrender. It was more than 3.5 years since Japanese troops had invaded Malaya and bombed Pearl Harbor. News of Japan's surrender produced spontaneous celebrations in Australia, the United States, and war-ravaged Asia and Europe. The Second World War was over. Japan's formal surrender took place on the 2nd of September when their delegation signed the documents of surrender aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, marking the official end of the Second World War. Today we pay our respects to the almost 40,000 Australian men and women who died as a result of their service during the Second World War, and who are commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. This evening we warmly welcome Mr John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. As always, we welcome the veterans who were served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Service Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Galston College from Ingleside, New South Wales. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read just one of the stories behind those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Victor William Shannon. Victor Shannon was born in Thornton Heath in the English county of Surrey on the 16th of September 1915, the son of John and Ethel Shannon. By the time of the Second World War, Victor was living in Canberra, where he worked as a carpenter and cabinet maker and as a dairy hand. His parents were living in Sussex in England. Victor Shannon enlisted for service in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 11th of October 1939. Allotted to the newly raised 2nd 3rd Battalion, after a brief period of training at Liverpool and Ingleburn, Shannon and his battalion took part in a farewell march through Sydney before sailing in the first troop convoy to leave Australia in early January 1940. Arriving at Alcantara on the Suez Canal in mid-February 1940, the battalion was trucked to a camp at Uli in Palestine, where the men undertook further training. In April, Shannon's skills were put to use when he joined the trade grouping as a carpenter. In July, he attended a Royal Australian Engineers Pioneer course. In January 1941, he left the carpentry trade grouping and joined the bricklayer group. He and his unit, the 2nd 3rd Battalion, took part in their first campaign, the advance against the Italians in eastern Libya, in January and February 1941, participating in successful attacks at Bardia and Tobruk. In early April that year, the battalion, with the rest of the 6th Division, deployed to Greece to resist the anticipated German invasion. For the 2nd 3rd, the Greek campaign was essentially one long withdrawal from its initial defensive positions to the port of Kalamata, from where it was evacuated on the 27th of April. Shannon was later reported as having escaped from Greece after being cut off from his unit for 6 weeks. Back in Palestine, the battalion was given little respite. In June and July 1941, it took part in the campaign in Syria, including the climactic Battle of Damour that sealed the defeat of the Vichy French forces. Shannon was reported as having become a prisoner of war for a brief period before being rescued by British troops. In November 1941, Shannon rejoined the carpenter and joiner trade grouping. He and his comrades left the Middle East, heading for the war against Japan on the 10th of March 1942. They were diverted on the voyage home, however. From early March to early July, they defended Ceylon from possible Japanese attack. The men finally disembarked in Australia in early August 1942. By then, Shannon had been promoted to acting corporal, a rank that was confirmed in September. On the 13th of September, Shannon and his battalion embarked from Brisbane, arriving in New Guinea a little over a week later. The battalion would not meet the Japanese in battle until the end of January 1943, where it joined the force defending Wau. In the interim, Shannon was promoted to acting sergeant and in December was evacuated with malaria, eventually returning to Australia for treatment. He spent time in the camp hospital at Canberra and then Brisbane, while his unit participated in the drive towards Salamoya. In September 1943, Shannon reverted to the rank of corporal. He was not able to rejoin his unit until early March 1944, by which point the 2nd 3rd was training in northern Queensland. In late November 1944, the 2nd 3rd disembarked at Atapi in New Guinea for its last campaign of the war. It spent much of the next 7 months engaged in mainly arduous patrolling to clear the Japanese from the Torricelli and Prince Alexander mountain ranges, and was still engaged in this role when the war ended. It was one of 2 battalions that fought all of Australia's major enemies during the war. On the 20th of April 1945, Corporal Shannon was admitted to a field ambulance, suffering from fever. He returned to his unit a week later, but was admitted to hospital the following day, suffering from scrub typhus and malaria. After having been part of the 2nd 3rd Battalion since its inception, he died of his illness on the 13th of May 1945, just 4 months before the end of the war. He was 29 years old. Today, his remains lie buried in a tapi in the war cemetery under the inscription, "A life nobly lived." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left amongst 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Victor William Shannon, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Canberra Party, present arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments. Well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.